and just some key things that we should be thinking about while we're structuring a paper. I usually do this talk later on, but I kind of want to just get this into your head. So when it comes to a sentence structure, we want to think of a salute, a standalone linguistic unit of thought. You should have just one major idea inside of a sentence. If you're trying to cram a whole bunch of ideas into a sentence, a great solution for that is another sentence. Short sentences are a little bit more easier to digest, and people can only really hold about 3 or 5 ideas in their head to begin with. So that's going to be an easier way for people to not just digest it, but also for you to write it. And we want to keep with a standard pattern: subject, verb, object. Jane kicked the ball. As opposed to, stay away from being Yoda. You will be a great Jedi, not be a great Jedi, you will. He even does voices. Come on. What do you want from me? Then you have subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement has this great importance because it reinforces as it clarifies your meaning. And when the verb is somewhat distant from the subject, that verb's form should recall to the reader whether the subject is singular or plural. Non-agreement of subject and verb, though, is not only confusing, it's stigmatizing, and it marks you as being insufficiently attentive to your language. Maybe someone who's even forgotten the subject of the sentence by the time you've come to the verb. A good thing this is not. And this is going to be more in depth as we go into Coffee Chapter 1 and 2 when you start reading that on Wednesday. Now, there are some other concessions that we should probably keep an eye on. These are just some simple mistakes that people tend to do, like is there or are there? Singular and versus plural subject-verb agreement. There is a cat on the porch. Singular form of the verb to be, singular form of the verb cat. There are many sights to see. Plural form of the verb to be, plural form of the word sight. Now, incorrect usage: there is few people who is brave enough to fight, as opposed to there are few people who are brave enough to fight, making sure that we have that plural subject-verb agreement. But the thing that we have to mention is sometimes we laugh this off, but this happens more often than not than we care to admit, because a lot of these word processors will not catch stuff like this. So you have to be careful about it and just make sure that your noun is dictating the verb usage. And then we'll keep on going through this right here. Active versus passive voice. Active voice states and make clear who's doing the action. Passive voice reverses the word order and buries the subject. Passive voice isn't necessarily incorrect, and this is what you'll notice with the book. It's not talking about what's right or what's wrong. It's more about that gray area of the English language where there's some variability and there's not really like a major consensus going one way or the other. And that's what makes this grammar book, One Day in the Life of the English Language, so interesting. So like active voice, this is active and passive voice examples. This is from Donald Rumsfeld when talking about the war in Iraq. Mistakes were made. Passive voice. Well, who made those mistakes? As opposed to we made mistakes. It takes the ownership away. You'll notice in, I think, chapter 2 of Coffee, they explain that like reporting on a murder uses passive voice in order for legal liability. So yeah, that's what's in the book. I'm telling you, read it. So here's a sentence of active versus passive voice, and it's the exact same sentence, just kind of flipped around. President-elect Barack Obama says he will create or protect some 3 million jobs by spending a massive amount of federal dollars to build roads and other shovel-ready government projects across the country. Cool. Kind of who's doing it? They're doing. What's he doing? And how's he doing it? Cool. Let's take that as a passive voice. Some 3 million jobs across the country. Well, what about them? Well, they will be created. By who? By President-elect Barack Obama, he says, by spending a massive amount of federal dollars. You ever heard of the term begging the question? This is what this means. It's begging the question. You have to ask as you're reading it in order to clarify what the writer is trying to convey to you. Passive voice is like paprika. You use a little bit, it's great. You use a lot of it, you ruin the jambalaya. So there's some key considerations also when you're writing. Audience, focus, tone, research, organization, argument and contrasting, and drafting. So audience, who are you writing this for? Focus, what are you trying to accomplish? Tone, how do you want to convey this? Do you want to be professional, serious, jokey, comedic? How much research needs to go into this? What kind of research needs to go into this? What kind of organization? Do you want to do this as a timeline? Do you want to do in chronological order, or do you want to do this as like a subject by subject discussion? Argument and contrast. Are you bringing in alternative points of view or contrasting different considerations? And then drafting, review, revise, and edit. Review, revise, and edit. It's one of the biggest things that you need to be able to do. You know, good drafting and good editing is what turns a B plus into an A. And there's 5 tenets we want to think about when we're talking about writing: clarity, accuracy, conciseness, logic, and completeness. Now, when it comes to this clarity, you don't want to misrepresent details by not explaining them clearly. You want to be specific rather than vague in descriptions and explanations. By the way, like, let's just say that you're talking to your girlfriend, right? And you go like, hey, I heard that Melissa was talking about some cheese bed the other day. Like, you're not going to just say, oh, okay, cool. You'll be like, well, what did she say? You know, I heard she's talking crap. Well, what'd she say? Well, how was she talking? You want detail. So why would you deny that to yourself in a research paper? Yeah. Now I'm trying to bring it around that way. Hey, it's the end of the day. Give me a break. But you want to be clear. You want to make sure that you unpack those details and not just leave it as broad strokes. Accuracy. Essentially, you need to know what you're talking about. You want to make sure that you have a good representation of research, and it's important that you understand it before you actually get to the writing section of it, because people will end up just, we've all been here where you're writing it, but then you're also getting more research because you found out you didn't have enough. So you're researching, then you're writing, and then you're researching a little bit more and like sticking that in. And then it ends up becoming disjointed because you just didn't have enough material to work with at the beginning. The other thing you need to know is you have to know where your research and sources are coming from. Whatever bias is in your paper, it starts at the research level. Whatever biases or assumptions or agendas that are inside of the research that you have collected, if you don't have a diversity of sources, whatever that bias is going to be baked into whatever you're writing. Before your assumptions and biases even come in, you've adopted whatever the research is if you stick to a small pool and a non-diverse group of sources. Conciseness. Don't confuse readers with wordiness or unnecessarily complex sentences. You know, short, awkward sentences are awkward, but, you know, long run-on sentences are too. And make sure you're discussing one idea at a time. Don't back and forth like a tennis match. And don't be wordy. Get to the point when you condense information when you can. And we have to think about things like the old new principle. And let me show you what I mean by that. In a very simple example, here's what I mean by the old new principle. John has a dog. The dog is a German Shepherd. German Shepherds are often used as police dogs. Police dogs were also trained to detect drugs at airports. If I just said John has a dog, police dogs were also trained to detect drugs at airports, you'd be like, huh? You have to be able to get me from A to B, to B to C, to C to D, to D to E. And so John has a dog. Dog is the new information in this sentence. Now let's go to the next sentence. The dog is the old information. German Shepherd is the new information. Now when we go to the next sentence, German Shepherd is the old information, and used as police dogs is the new information. Police dogs in the next sentence is the old information. And then used to detect drugs at airports, that's the new information. So you have to think about the old new principle as, what is it that I'm writing that's going to be informed by the next thing I write? So has anybody ever told you that your paper doesn't flow and you didn't quite understand what they meant by that? This is what they're talking about. This is what they talk about in terms of logical flow of ideas. And that's why it's so incredibly important, because this helps immensely in terms of detailing what you're talking about. So each sentence should naturally and logically flow from the one before it. And likewise, you can do this with each paragraph should transition into the next one. You know, you ask yourself, what did I just write, and how is it going to dictate the next thing I'm going to write, and how is it going to inform what I just wrote? And you want to finish idea completely before you jump back and forth. And completeness, you want to make sure that essentially that you're looking at all angles, that you're looking at relevant competing hypotheses. You don't want to just justify your own ideas. And the most important thing is you need to discuss implications. You know, so, okay, so what happens if DACA gets reinstated? All right, so what are the implications of that? You're picking all of these controversial topics. Okay, so what's the point? You have to be able to discuss what are the implications and consequences of whatever policy debate you're looking at.